Welcome to this edition of the Smarter Money Moves webinar series, Planning to Reduce College Costs. I am Tracy Brewer. It is my pleasure to introduce our presenter, James Brewer. But before I do, I need to honor our lawyers with the following disclaimers. Any of the financial products or financial ideas discussed today are not a recommendation to purchase or implement. You should consult with a financial professional or tax expert before making any investment decision. Past performance is not a guarantee of future performance. Advisory services are offered through Envision Wealth Planning, Inc., a registered investment advisor in the state of Illinois. Insurance products and services are offered through Envision Insurance Services, LLC, an affiliated company. James Brewer achieved the designation of College Funding and Student Loan Advisor through PayforEd. Envision Wealth Planning will receive no compensation should you elect the PayforEd do-it-yourself option. James Brewer, also known as JB, is founder and CEO of Envision Wealth Planning. Envision has been named to Expertise's Best Financial Advisors in Chicago 4 years in a row. He co-authored Individual Biases in Retirement Planning and Wealth Management, Financial Behavior, published by Oxford University Press. He is a certified financial planner, considered by most the gold standard in financial planning. He is a chartered divorce financial analyst and college funding and student loan advisor, among others. He has an MBA and science master degrees from the Sloan School at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. James is a personal finance contributor to Forbes.com. He has written College Savings Expectations and Family Contributions and Paying for College, Issues to Consider Which You See. Here's JB.
Thanks, Tracy, for that great introduction. Hopefully everybody can hear me. My passion is helping people make smarter money moves. Today we'll focus on making smarter college funding moves. As you see on this slide, there's some really interesting movement regarding student loan debt. Essentially, it's about a 45-degree angle since 2003, jumping significantly over credit card and auto loans. No wonder that a lot of people have been talking about this challenge. And then when we see the student debt across 3 generations, this came from a survey from AARP and the Association of Young Americans, and you see that 48% of millennials have a student loan either for themselves or for someone else, 34% for Gen X, and boomers at only 12%. The burden of student loan debt has prevented people from saving for retirement, buying a house, buying a car, and moving from their current residence. U.S. News reported how student loan debt affects women back in May of 2019. And then more recently, in February, graduates of historically Black colleges may be paying more for loans, says a watchdog group. Plenty of activity we see in the media talking about this issue of college funding, and I think it's important to note that the college student loan debt starts at the selection of the college. Here's our agenda. I'm going to start talking about what I believe should be the phases of college funding, look at some expectations and myths, give some insights into expected family contributions, the understanding of the what and the how of paying for ed, and then envisioning your outcome. Envision's college funding phases are saving for, saving on, and paying off college. In the saving for stage, think of that as I'm starting to save money. And I also should consider insuring myself, being the breadwinner or breadwinners, or even the caretaker of the children should the breadwinners not be around for whatever reason. Often that could be death, maybe it's even disability. And then investing money, just saving alone, especially when college has been inflating at about over 6% per year. Many people have thought that that couldn't continue, but it hasn't slowed down very much. And then there's the saving on and paying for, italicized, because that's what we're gonna focus on today, the college choice, or if you think about it, what is the thing that would create the principal for which that student loan starts? And then the paying off phase, or the student loans, there's about 128 different choices, a maze of different choices that people have in that arena. Many people selecting options that they don't even understand. And no wonder there's so many options, as well as credit cards are something that a lot of people don't even understand paying off, and now you add the complexity of student loans. The PayforEd perspective on college funding, it has 4 phases. I combined deciding and learning into the second choice that I gave earlier. But in the planning stage, as people are, having the birth of the child, moving towards them being in high school, we see it goes from about 6 million to about 2 million people in the deciding phase. Then now you're in college, or the learning phase, 21 million or so there. And then in the repaying. What's interesting is that we appear to be adding more into the repaying at a faster rate than the repaying is going away. So now let's take a lens, or take a look through what things might look like for parents and students, and then a bit later we're going to take a college perspective. So historically, we've really focused on what college to get into. Sometimes people have an idea from their youth as a college that they would like to go to for whatever reason. They get their heart set on that college and sometimes don't even look at other options. Just because someone might even feel that their academics are strong doesn't necessarily mean that they'll actually be able to get into a certain college, but typically people are focused more on the admission rather than the outcome of the education. So if you went to a potentially a great school, but the career prospects weren't so hot, then the outcome of even getting in may not give a return on investment. We also think and need to think about the graduation rates and the transfer rates. We believe it's about 34% or so of people are graduating in that 4-year period. It usually is taking 5 to 6 years, and this is just talking about undergrad. You also have the problem that some people who actually start going to college don't end up finishing college, and it doesn't mean that their loans go away. They actually do have the loans now, but they don't have that return on the investment of going to college, but now they have increased debt, and the income that potentially expected to cover that isn't there. And some careers just simply require more education. So in that case, you may find yourself not just looking at a 4-year cost of college, 6 years, 10 years, depending upon what profession that you are trying to get yourself in. So you need to think of a long game about this rather than a short game. And just that change needs to happen quickly. Then there are a few myths and common half-truths. Some people feel that they're not going to qualify for aid, so that they won't even complete the free application for federal student aid, known by many to be FAFSA, but if this is unfamiliar territory, think of it as the free application for federal student aid. We'll give you some reasons later why you should apply. Some are trying to take the assets out of the child's name, believing that that's going to help. We'll look at how the FAFSA actually works and how another profile works as well, to try to figure out what aid is and why some of that doesn't necessarily provide what people would actually like for it to. If you've got less money, you'll qualify for more financial aid. That could be either income or assets. So certain schools are saying that if you can academically get here, then you might not pay, but I don't believe that they have not done calculations on what their expectation of that's going to be. So that's really not going to fix it for the majority of people. Some think that they're going to negotiate price with the colleges, the complexity of the student body that they want to create, as well as the simple revenue that they need to generate, likely doesn't make that something that's going to happen either, where the negotiation's really giving us more aid versus negotiating the price. And then loan forgiveness programs will help me pay for college. There are a lot of people who somewhat misunderstand this whole idea of loan forgiveness. And what I would think is loan forgiveness is this emotional thing, like, wow, someone would forgive my loan and it's just gone. So just tell me how many payments I need to make and it's gone. Well, if you are an income-based payment plan, that means that you will be paying more over time. And then there's public loan forgiveness, and there's just, let's say, public service, and then there's just regular loan forgiveness. So in public, you need to make a certain amount of payments on time with an employer that qualifies. And a lot of people don't have a qualifying employer, or over time they change jobs, and that may actually kick them out. Then you have the other student loan forgiveness, where what really happens is that the balance that is quote unquote forgiven is then considered a gift by the IRS and added to your income at the time. So for example, let's say your loan started out at $125,000 and grew to $250,000, and you're applauding the forgiveness. Well, it's considered a gift by the IRS, added to your income, which let's say might be $150,000 at the time, and now you have to pay taxes on $400,000 when you were really paying W-2 taxes as $150,000. Most people wouldn't have that money, and they would find themselves in a payment plan with the IRS that would look probably somewhat like what they were in with paying the loan servicer. And then there's the lens of the college and universities themselves. If you think about it, they need to build a new team every year. If you follow any athletics at schools, you know, the seniors graduate and now we need a new crew, and the seniors graduate and we need a crew. So every year they need to build a new team of the student body. It might mean that they want to build up a certain department. Maybe they have strengthened their philosophy department, or they've strengthened their math department, and now they're looking for graduates that would actually, or I should say, new freshmen that would fit well in those programs. It's hard to know on the outside. We tend to talk about universities and colleges for their brand name, but not the specific schools within them. And then there's the idea of the combination of need and money. So they actually have money to spend, but they can't give everyone a scholarship and give it free to everyone. So they're looking at a combination of the student need and the money that they have available that they could potentially put against trying to attract the right student body. So they get themselves involved in like the law of large numbers. So we have an admissions department that is trying to get so many people to apply, because we know that certain number apply, then certain people get offers, and of those who get an offer, then a certain number accept. So sometimes they're out saying lots of things. They know they've got to get a lot of people, and everyone should apply. That doesn't mean that your child will necessarily get in. The selection process can change just because of this, changing body that they have, and the different schools that they may have added, or maybe even no longer support inside. So, a student that may have gotten accepted last year may not get accepted this year, vice versa, as well as need packages. And one thing you'll find is usually they're only talking about 1 year of financial information, meaning what's it going to cost to come to us in the fall through the beginning of the next calendar year. Well, if inflation is going at about 6% per year for colleges, that means that it's going to be 6% more the following year, 6% more on top of that year, and then 6%. So things are going to be growing over time. So shouldn't you consider that entirety rather than just consider that one short-term time period? Then there's some issues to me around the transparency of the expectations, parents and students, the child, the stress of the unknown. Will I get in? I want to go to school maybe with some of my peers. That might, just kind of create some unrest, and sometimes there's conversation that gets created that's not really true. Admissions office is not always selecting the smartest student. If they need people to go in, let's say the philosophy department and not in the physics department, the physics student may consider themselves smarter than the one going into the philosophy department. I'll let those in those areas have that debate, but in some cases, they might have fit one place but not in the other. But hey, we're trying to fill seats now in philosophy because we filled our seat in physics, and maybe our physics department isn't even that large. Need blind really is not really true, and they're just kind of numbers that will bear that out as we just continue talking. They are masters of big data. They do this on an ongoing basis. You probably only have so many children, not as many as any of one of the schools, because that would be probably several hundred and not several thousand. So they're doing this more often and fine-tuning their processes over the years, where most people are doing this 1, 2, 4 times with a number of children, and depending upon what the children's acumen is and the age disparity, would even have different situations. So making the best decision for your college choice should involve things like academics and majors, the campus environment. With campus environment, usually parents don't want to hear that the kid is interested in the school that's on the top 10 list for being a party school. And then, of course, some factor for financial aid, but financial aid could vary based upon the number of children that you have over time, and if multiple are in at the same time. Often people think about the career in terms of the income or that's going to be derived. Oh, I'm a medical student, I'm going to be a dentist or a pharmacist. But also consider that the average debt, according to the Institute for College Access and Success, the American Medical College, the Dental Education Association, and the Association of Colleges of Pharmacy are reporting average debt: medical, $196,520, dental, $285,184, and pharmacist, $166,528. I've had the wonderful opportunity to speak at one of the pharmacy schools here in the Chicago area, and know that the 166 is an average. I know some people who are well in excess of that number, and those who are at zero, or a very small number. So, 166 is a real number. Averages are just averages, so don't find yourself getting locked in on a certain number. It's an average. So for someone in the dental school, 285, they're actually in excess of 300. So paying for college is just not financial aid. There's the expected family aid position. Family contributions can change based upon the number of children who are in school at any given time, and also changes in parental income. There's tax savings and credits. There's an American Opportunity Credit per child of $2,500 per year, so that would offset some money depending upon what school you go to. That could be a much larger number than others. It doesn't scale for the cost of the college. It is a flat credit. Then we've got college selection, private versus public, alone, and will that private college potentially pay more than the public if that is the reason for your actually selecting that. Then there's debt structure. We're going to talk a lot more about debt structure, but kind of think that certain debts, for example, if you're at a federal loan versus a private loan, parents might find themselves co-signing on a private loan, and what's that going to affect? And if the child is going to go to grad school versus just do undergrad. So grad school debt interest rates are higher than undergrad rates. So there's lots of things to think about there, but if you can think about the breadth of education, then that should help drive some better decisions to actually decrease your overall debt by how you are structuring it. And of course, the education outcome, because in the end, having the career that's going to pay for this cost of college and then catapult the child forward, who will quickly, after they get out of college, no longer be the child. Well, I guess they'll always be your baby, but now they're an adult responsible for their own adult life. So let's talk about cost of attendance. Usually people focus on things like tuition and fees, room and board, books. Can't believe they are that expensive. But what about personal expenses and travel? Depending upon how far the child is away from school, there may be more or less personal expenses versus if they stayed closer to home and didn't have those expenses. Then there's the additional family costs that aren't included. Again, let's say the child is on one coast and you are in the middle or on another coast. Those trips going to that to see your child, or the child coming back to see you, mainly let's focus on the parental costs, because now you're going to have to probably find yourself a hotel, depends upon how long you're going to stay. So there's some costs that don't necessarily show up in the full cost of attendance based upon the choices that you make. So really we should start to think about what is the net cost. So the cost of attendance minus the expected contribution versus, and then what's left over would really be need. Now I wanted to say that what you expect, what you feel you can afford, isn't necessarily what the methodologies that the schools use. So let's look at those for a moment here. So there's a couple of different methodologies. The federal method, or better known as the free application for federal student aid, FAFSA. You see it says parental income and assets and child's income and assets. But if you look on this list, you'll see nothing that says anything about debt and lifestyle. Debt and lifestyle. So I know a few situations where the parents doctors, those high average debt that we saw earlier, they now have children going to school and they still have debt, but they are showing the high parental income, but they're not getting an offset for their own debt. So look at the methodologies. And then there's the institutional methodology, sometimes also called the CSS, or College Scholarship Service Profile. There are a number of schools. They're not the federal schools. They are private, or there are some schools that kind of look like they're private, although one might think they are a state school. But they use a different methodology that considers additional things, such as home equity, business assets, other assets. So they're actually saying, hey, we believe that potentially, even if you have, say, a cash value life insurance policy, that you can pull money out of those, maybe even feeling that, look, did you not do some of these things in an effort not to pay for your child to go to school? So depending upon what school that you go to, you may find yourself under the federal methodology or the institutional methodology, where the institutional methodology, because it considers more, you might find yourself in a situation that you would be expected to pay more than you would under the federal methodology. And then there's some wrinkles inside of there regarding whether or not there's divorce involved and which parent should claim, and there's a lot of other things that we will leave for a specific one-on-one conversation. So this free application for federal student aid, it's not one number, but 4 different calculations. Even the institutional methodology schools, you would submit both the FAFSA and their application. So it's a combination of the parent's income, the student's income, parent's assets, and the student's asset, and that's this quote unquote expected family contribution. So inside of that, the assets aren't really the largest driver here, but you see that 5.64% for the parents and 20% for the students. And then you see with parental income and student income, actually the student income is a much higher driver. And if you think sometimes there might be, I took a summer job or I did some things, use that money for college. Yes, that's what the school's going to say we're expecting your child is going to do. And within these, there are actually some allowances. I didn't want to get into all the wrinkles of those things. So, but as your income rises, those allowances mean less. People at the lower income and asset levels, those allowances can help more in the calculations. And then regarding FAFSA's income, it's not actually like your most recent. There's this interesting calculation, which basically the simplest way to think of it is it's going to be about 2 years look back. There's some timing things going on, but not to get into all that complexity. But this slide just basically says, hey, if you are, your kid's a senior, you're probably looking at that sophomore year tax return for that income. And we do know that people's income changes, so you may have to find yourself explaining that your income went down if it indeed went down, but if it was the same, that will give you an idea, or if you had an unusually big year in that year. So then after your child gets, does their application, it goes over, because those people are getting you all excited. Maybe you're already excited at the school you want to go to. There's a thing called enrollment management. This is a snapshot out of one of the views that you would get inside of the PayforEd service, which I find an amazingly helpful in trying to understand more about school selection and your position and other factors. So let's look at the colors. So in quadrant one, the best way to explain this, well, actually, maybe I step back. So there's on the vertical axis, we look at academics, on the horizontal, financial need. So in the top quadrant, those are students who are strong academically and who come from situations where they can pay. Keep in mind, the schools only have so much money that they can use, so those students look pretty good to them, as well as they help to make the school even look academically strong, because a lot of people want to pursue an academically strong school. And then we have quadrant two. So here again, the student is academically strong, but they have some need for money, and the further you go to the right, the more money they actually need. And then quadrant three, they're below the academic average. They can still pay, but they're below the academic average. And quadrant four, below the academic average and can't pay. In this case, the blue dot is indicating where the student, this particular student, is relative to this particular college. So let's talk about potential strategies. We're looking at college one and college two hypothetical cases. So let's say in the first college, the total cost of college, cost of attendance, it'd be $20,000. The expected family contribution using the free application for federal student aid, FAFSA, was $25,000. So there's no need. You might be saying, so why in the world do I see a school package? Well, one of the benefits from applying for the FAFSA is that you would get a federal loan of $5,500 when the child is a freshman. And that money rises, we'll talk about that later. Then college two, the total cost was $40,000. The expected family contribution remained at $25,000. Your FAFSA number will always be the same at any school, unlike the institutional methodology where each school has their own system. So that there's a financial need of $15,000, and the school is providing a package of $12,000. So you still see that there would be a gap after that. But one might argue that, well, the school's package, what does that mean? And the $5,500 is going to be part of that $12,000 package. So just keep that in mind. It's just kind of gets moved over, and that's one reason one needs to decode the offer letters that you would get from the schools. Now, what would likely be the case here is that there would be some money that would be subsidized. The interest is subsidized versus having unsubsidized loans, which is typically the case, that loans are not subsidized by someone else and you're simply paying interest. So we've got need-based financial aid, merit-based financial aid, and a lot of people, of course, love the idea of scholarships. It's merit, academic scholarships, athleticships, as I refer to them, and any special talents that might say that I want your child to be at our school, so we will provide you some money that you don't have to repay. And then there's self-help aid, such as loans. I think that loans that are federal loans, that are subsidized or unsubsidized loans, any loans, to me, that's all self-help aid, period, because you're on the hook for repaying those. And then things like work study, so that can, offset some personal expenses that the child might have, which we talked about at the cost of attendance. In some cases, there are some scholarship and investment websites and services. They're not always working in your best interest. They may be getting your information and selling it off to someone else. So, you know, in the desire for aid, just be cognizant that these things may end up happening. So this is a screenshot from the PayforEd College Cost Analyzer, and most of the things I'll be showing you are these screenshots. So it shows a family contribution in the first year of $43,200. The $5,500 in Stafford loans, that's in the yellow. And you'll see that over the 4-year period, that number actually increases. That's just a function of the fact that those Stafford loans increase over time, and throws in the gift aid that would have come from an individual school. So these are individual school snapshots. And notice that in the outer years, it goes down to 21.6, which likely is because there is a second child that is now going to school. So the cost or the expected family contribution remains the 43.2. It just would be split amongst more than one child. Who knows? You may even have twins. Have some friends who do have twins. And then how you will pay. Well, if there was a college fund, the college fund potentially is going to be used in the first year. In this example, some family money, and then there's additional resources that people are needing to bring to the table. So, if your expected contribution was something and you had a college fund, you still can go use the college fund, but in the next year, you don't have that college fund. So now you're going to have to pay out of pocket, which could be out of income or taking on your own loans. So financing options. Well, let's start with the federal direct Stafford loans. As we've seen, there's a progressive amount. In one slide, the $5,500 became $65, and in the junior and senior year was $7,500. These loans are the child's legal responsibility rather than the parents. Might really like the idea of the subsidized loans, just basically means that the interest isn't being paid for those years that the child is in school, but then the loan, the interest ticker starts after that, and with the unsubsidized, the ticker starts from day one. A lot of parents started going into the Parent Plus loans. You do need a good credit rating. These are now going to be the responsibility of the parent, and because it's the responsibility of the parent, it's now going to show on your credit report. So that may hinder your access to credit for other things you may be considering, such as a business or something like that down the road. Keep this in mind, because most people aren't paying these loans off in a year or two. They're taking quite some time, given, or I guess depending upon the profession that you are pursuing. And then there's private loans. Well, with a private loan, probably your student your child hasn't had a job before, there's no collateral, so probably need a cosigner. In some cases, there are conversations with a child to say, hey, look, mom and dad will go in on those Parent Plus loans, maybe even the private loans, but we're going to expect you to go pay for those. I know a case on a Parent Plus loan where the income repayment was based upon the parent's income, which ended up being double what the student's was, or the student now graduate, now adult child. And now they were trying to pay off some of their own student loans and pay off the parents' loans, which were more than they would have been able to afford on their own. So it was really providing a financial crunch and an emotional burden. Then some people want to use home equity loans, but those probably have some attractive interest rates, but now you're putting your home at risk. Don't know if that's a good idea or not. And some other people look at other loan options, which could be off of a cash value life insurance policy if you have enough cash value built up into those policies. You got to watch that you don't collapse those policies because you've taken out such a large loan, and others might go in and take out a loan on their 401k. Well, if you're taking a loan on your 401k, how are you going to, and especially it's your first year in school, what are you going to do in year 2 and beyond? So some things might give some short-term answers, so the sooner you can come up with a strategy to pay, the better off you are. Now let's talk a little bit about debt structure. It drives repayment and forgiveness options. So if you're under federal program, the federal program has some options for forgiveness, which could be public student loan forgiveness. They also include some life insurance and disability insurance protection embedded, which they may, or you may find that the interest rates are higher, but they're actually incorporating some things like that. Most of us don't really want to think about our disability or worse, a premature death. But if you're going to find yourself on the hook for somebody else's loans, it would be a good thing to make sure that if they did die, that those don't continue on with you and that they would go away. And don't expect that when there was an opportunity for you to have elected those options, and it does happen to you, that someone is going to say, you are forgiven and we feel sorry for you. It also determines the legal responsibility. So we talked a bit about whether or not the loans were in the name of your child or the loan in the parents or a combination of both, and how that would affect credit and the impact on credit reports. So there's lots of factors beyond that as we even think about grad school and potentially taking on loans in undergrad that would have a lower interest rate than the grad school loans, depending upon the expected time of when you're going to pay those off. So just important to take a long-term view and look at all of your options. So it's important to really take this 4-year until graduation approach. I like to tell people, the decision that you're going to make, especially if it's going to involve student loans under the federal usually are expecting a 10-year payoff, although you can extend it, but the idea or the ideal situation would be to pay it off sooner than later. But what is the total of the 4 years going to be, or more on the grad? So now that's 6 years. And if you're going to pay that off in 10 years, you're really making a 16-year decision. I do know some people who are electing payoffs that are about 30 years. Well, the 30-year payoff doesn't mean that you're actually not going to pay more money, because with the interest that's going to accrue, you're actually going to pay more money. Too often we just simply look at the principal value and the monthly payment, but not necessarily look at what is the total cost that it's actually reducing effectively my net worth over my lifetime. So we need to really take a much more expansive view. The colleges typically only provide a 1-year view, so what tool can you use to help you take that longer term view? And getting your child involved. I think one of the challenges here is that most cases, the child hasn't held something that required them to learn about repaying debt. And it's easy to, and at least I'll just use my own self, you're reading these brochures and the college is telling you about careers and it sounds really good, and you're really starting to get focused on the income that I'm going to make and the cars I might be driving and the places that I might travel to and all these things. And you're not really thinking about, well, there's taxes that I'm gonna have to pay, and fuel for my car because mom and dad aren't just gonna give me a car that I can drive around. So all of these things, and then, oh yeah, by the way, there's the student loan thing that I really don't want to pay because I really want to enjoy my life. But before we were just signing our name, a bit like swiping the credit card, and not understanding there's going to be a repayment. So engaging your child and helping them understand, well, what's your life got to be once you graduate? And I'm a fan of let's do a cash flow and put that student loan debt expected obligation on there, and have that be one of the factors, including taxes, and saying, well, that's what you're going to have left over to pay that loan off in 10 years. Most people aren't taking that approach, which is one of the reasons that student loan debt is getting larger and larger, because people are then electing for taking a smaller payment that often doesn't get this paid off at all. So using the software with PayforEd, or working with someone with a college funding and student loan designation, and other advisors who might be able to help you without those designations, building a custom situation for you. So, sometimes that the plan doesn't end up being what we expected. So, we may have projected that the numbers were going to look a certain way, and then they actually look different. So, having some different types of scenarios to actually help you look at that. You may actually have a plan that might have said, well, let's use the college fund completely up front. But, through some further analysis, maybe it made more sense to use a portion over the next couple of years. It could, be something that was in your income. There's so many different reasons why that things may end up needing to play out differently. But the actual way of trying to do this is to try to help your child graduate in 4 years or 6 years, if there's a 2 years worth of grad school, in order to try to minimize the overall cost of college. Again, it's not necessarily going to be simply the cost of attendance. It will be the net cost, and the net cost starts to grow back based upon any finance charges that you're adding on top of that. This just tries to give you a quick idea of, if there's multiple children in the first couple of years at one school, and again, this is not a two-school view, but a one-school view, there would be an expected family contribution that would impact the aid and the gift aid in the first 2 years. That would be $42,434 for the family contribution, but now we have the next child coming in, and now the expected family contribution at that school would reduce. So now there would be some additional gift aid that we would be looking at, and there might be some that would come from the school. But remember, in that one example, some of the gift aid really didn't look like gift aid in the way that we would define gift aid. And sometimes there's a purity in the view that we're looking here, which sometimes has to get shaken out from the offer letter that's given, because the offer letters sometimes make things look like one thing, but when you really strip it down, that wasn't the offer that was expected. Now, you also may have another situation where the child was in, it was $23,937, let's say, but then that child graduated, and now the next child, it's still $43,873. So now we see in this case that the aid shrunk, because now you don't have that second child in school. So again, these are custom situations, and sometimes the schools like to front load the awards, but let's say they only had a pool of money that was only so big, potentially they wanted to get students into a certain program, so they gave you a lot more money in the first years, but then that money didn't continue in the second year and it shrunk down, and next thing you know, you actually have to put in more money. So it's important to understand the awards and whether or not those are 4-year awards. Are there any strings tied to them, such as academic performance? So it's just important to understand what you really have in front of you. Be focused on the 4-year or longer, not just the 1 year. So we need to create a college funding strategy. Understanding the details of your expected family contribution. Was it driven off income? Was it driven off assets? What's the proper use of assets and debt in your particular case? Making sure that you understand the debt structure. What debt may you find yourself needing to take on, or your child? And I really think that we need to go a long way in helping more children who will become adults when they're after they've graduated, because many people start to just throw their hands up and say, I can't pay this off. But at the time they took on the debt, they were saying, oh sure, oh sure, oh sure, not really understanding, because again, I think sometimes it's easy to sign your name to something but not really understand the impact. And I think that taking that 4-year approach with what we have been showing you in those screenshots, and then actually converting that into, well, what is your life going to look like once you've graduated to pay off that debt, and the life, the extra living that someone might have thought they might have, if they can just kind of pay that off, potentially 21 to 31, it's gone. They're only 31 years old, which maybe when you're 17, oh my gosh, that just seems like so old. But when you're a lot older, 31, you're like, man, I wish I was 31 again. So just some conversation to actually help people understand the debt structure and how it's going to affect them. Of course, our goal should be to lower your overall out-of-pocket costs. So you need to be an informed consumer in order to do that. Well, in the interest of time, we're not going to answer any questions during this webinar. If you have specific questions that you have from some of the slides, please do email us. There will be an email coming to you, but we'll also give you an email a bit later. So we have some offers, and the first is, just so you know, that you can go to the PayforEd website yourself. Under Solutions, you'll find the College Cost Analyzer and a couple of others that may help you in your own situation. This is a kind of a do-it-yourself. There are advisors who are college funding and student loan advisors like I am, that can help you further, but know that you may decide that you want to give it a go on your own. I also provide access to my blocks. If you look in the chat box, you should see the link for my blocks. We'll add it into the emails that are coming to you later as well. But my blocks is a kind of a really interesting educational tool that can also provide a window into particular areas around your finances. You see here that we've got paying off credit cards and college loans and building up an emergency fund. And there's this thing called Yodlee, and it can do a ton of things to help you look at your financial position, expenses, create budgets, look at transactions that you may not have really understood that make up those expenses. In order to do so, and you just click that link, you're going to go and click the register, and you'll self-register yourself. And you can click around and sample the blocks inside. If you'd like to learn more about working with Envision Wealth and our unique methodology for helping people make smarter money moves, or you just want to focus in on the smarter money moves around college that we've talked about today, you can either give us a call at 312-448-1010, email us at info@envisionwealth.us. You'll notice that we do have offices in Chicago and in Newark, Delaware, but we also help lots of people virtually through the same technology that we're using for this webinar. Well, Tracy, that is all that I have.
Thanks for attending. Please don't forget to take advantage of the complimentary offer to test drive my blocks. If you'd like to learn more about Envision's financial life planning process, please email info@envisionwealth.us or sign up on the Contact Us page on our website. Thanks.